Good evening and welcome to National Rail Awards 2021. We are delighted to be doing the show IRL in real life, back on the stage in the Great Room at the Grosvenor House Hotel in front of a big crowd of railway friends and colleagues. Last year, for understandable reasons, we had to do the show on a green screen online digital version, and it worked well enough, although it was a bizarre experience as we discussed earlier. But it was very sad that we couldn't actually present the trophies to the winners at the moment in front of a crowd so the celebrations could go forward fully. Tonight we go back to that. But over the last 18 months our lives have been thrown into chaos, as we all know, by a virus which in early February last year few of us had even heard of, and which just about nobody outside the scientific community even understood. By the early days in March, greed was being measured in toilet rolls as panic buying took hold. By the end of the month, you could be literally arrested for sitting on a park bench. Now, if any of us had been told those things in the beginning of January, we would have said that cannot happen in Britain. But it did, and we saw far more restrictions than we ever dreamed possible on our lives and businesses. When the lockdown came in late March last year, it caused utter chaos for many businesses which simply had to shut up shop and hope for the best, with no knowledge of when it might end. This applied particularly to our passenger network. Overnight, 95% of its business disappeared. There was no alternative but for the government to virtually extinguish the franchise system, and all our passenger train operators became effective contractors for the government, running the trains for a fee. But the passenger network still really stepped up and made sure that essential workers could get to where they needed to be at work to keep the country going. In London, GTR even ran extra trains at 24 hours notice to make sure that medical staff, doctors, nurses and other technicians and ancillary staff could get to and from work okay. It really was one heck of an effort. But for the freight industry, the pandemic provided enormous challenge and enormous opportunity. The challenge was to make sure that food and essential supplies and PPE and medical equipment could get to where it needed to be to keep the country ticking over while we stayed at home in order to try and restrict the spread of this dreadful virus. Of course, all those essential supplies and food and PPE was carried in shipping containers. And I'm at East Midlands Gateway, a relatively new intermodal terminal which got going just before the pandemic last year. It's now starting to get into its stride, and there are 5 trains in and 5 trains out every day, which is the equivalent of about 350 lorries, and there's capacity for much, much more. And I'll tell you about that a bit more later on. With a much quieter network, the freight industry really seized the day to show what it could do. From Southampton, some half-mile trains, that's 775 metres, were run to terminals all over the country. In the Peak District, 4,000 tonnes monster trains were loaded up and went to London. That's the equivalent of 200 lorries. On the normally busy network, it never would have been possible to even try those things. They worked, and they work well. The challenge now is to integrate such bigger trains into the normal network as it comes back to life. Because once you've got a 4,000 tonne train rolling, you do not want to keep stopping it in loops here and there to let other trains pass. So there's a real planning challenge, but the benefits are enormous. I shall leave it there for the moment and tell you a little bit more about East Midlands Gateway later on. But now it's time for our annual flight with a Network Rail Air Operations team to show our network and its trains from a bird's eye point of view. This year our theme is to pay tribute not only to the freight industry but also to Network Rail's infrastructure engineers who also seized the opportunity. Sit back, enjoy the fly. So, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that short flight with Network Rail Air Operations Division, and especially to Gary and Sean for doing the honours there. And indeed, thanks to Ricky Carmichael's wider team for the work that Air Ops does with us during other parts of the year, such as at our annual Rail Live show in June. Now, the post-pandemic prospects for rail freight are really good, which is why we are seeing such consistent and continued investment in intermodal facilities like this at East Midlands Gateway at other places in the country. Durft Phase 3 at Daventry is coming online soon, with a Royal Mail bespoke rail-linked facility, and there's planning consent underway at both Northampton and West Midlands for even more capacity. Intermodal prospects really are very good. This 50-acre site at East Midlands Gateway is operated by Maritime Transport, the biggest shifter of boxes in the UK. 12,500 by road and 4,500 by rail each week, and it's the intention to narrow that gap. On this site There's storage capacity for the equivalent of 5,000 20-foot containers. There are already the equivalent of 2,000. And that space really is going to be needed, because in the business park that's growing around this site, some big names are doing big business. Amazon and Nestle, the chocolate manufacturers, are already here, and they use this terminal all the time for the inbound goods, which manage to get to their warehouses without even going on the national road network. It's all contained within the park. Thereafter, finished product goes out by road for national distribution, but there's hope that that can come to rail eventually too. Other big names are on the way. Mars should be here soon, and that will add to this terminal's growing business, and that's great news. So that's it. It only remains for us to get on with the National Rail Awards, so we're going to do just that. Thanks again to not just the freight industry, but all railway men and women who've kept us going through the pandemic. We owe you a huge word of thanks. So now, sit back, relax, fill your glasses and enjoy the National Rail Awards 2021.